Hey there, fantasy owners. Welcome to Lift the Cup Fantasy, or LTC Fantasy as some people call it. We're rolling along, starting to almost wind down on our team reviews for 21-22, and today we're going to look at the Vancouver Canucks. Take a look at who led them in different stats for goalies, defensemen, and forwards. See who is their biggest fantasy disappointment this season, who is their biggest fantasy surprise, and who on their roster was relevant fantasy-wise on a weekly basis. And we'll take a peek at some streamers that helped out different owners throughout different points of the season. These reviews continue to come out a few times a week because no better way to spend the fantasy off-season than at least talk a little bit of fantasy hockey here. Don't forget to subscribe. That way you don't miss your favorite team's review. Maybe you want to catch your rival's review. Maybe you want to catch all 32. Or just take a peek at a team that sometimes gets overlooked fantasy-wise. So we'll get right into it. Goalie stats, it's basically Demko, but he led him in games played at 64. Played a ton of games for him. Wins at 33, nice win total there. Goals against at 2.72, and he had a .915 save percentage. As I was saying, Demko really was an absolute workhorse in net for Vancouver there. Halak played decent, brought in this year, but not the greatest. He was just there to supplement Demko when he needed a rest, basically. So Halak's not really relevant fantasy-wise. Maybe in a spot start, if you know ahead of time, you might pick him up. But Demko was the man right from the start of the season right until the end there. D-man stats, no real surprise here. Quinn Hughes led him in goals at 8, assists at 60, and points at 68. Nice point total for the young D-man there. Plus minus was a split between Tyler Myers and Luke Shen at plus 15. Shen led him in hits at 273, so he definitely threw the body around there. Myers came back, led him in blocks, 148 blocks. And Oliver Ekman-Larsson actually led him in shots on goal, not Hughes, at 168. Really, as expected, Hughes was a fantasy stud this year. He was good for the Canucks all year round. As I mentioned, another great season for the young D-man. If you have him in a keeper league or a dynasty league, definitely hold on to that one there. Ekman-Larsson, while not obviously putting up the numbers he used to when he was younger, did have a okay fantasy season overall. He did get you some points in a few different categories there. And other than that, there really wasn't too much to talk about. Brad Hunt on occasion was okay just because he got some second unit power play time, but nothing really to talk about really outside of Hughes. Moving up front there's a few people to talk about, but who led him in different stats? It was JT Miller and Elias Pettersson that led him in goals at 32. Miller led him in assists at 97, so he also led him in points at 99. Almost that century mark there. Connor Garland led him in plus minus at plus 18. And then it was Miller. Miller led him in hits at 172, blocks at 56, and shots on goal at 206. As you can tell by the stats, Miller really did do it all for the Canucks up front there. Really good in a Cats league for sure there. Other people, obviously Pettersson did turn it around after a really slow start. He really struggled at the beginning of the year, and he really turned it on in the second half there. Other than that, Horvat, Garland also had decent fantasy seasons. Biggest fantasy disappointment this year has to be Brock Besser. Really, it was his lowest point per game total of his career. He was really down. Now they're swirling around trade rumors around there. See if that happens or not. A lot of the time it doesn't there, but really was very underwhelming considering where he would have been drafted in most fantasy leagues. Biggest fantasy surprise has to be JT Miller. He had, before this season, his best was 72 points in a season, and he finished just shy of the century mark, having 99 points. So you had a 27-point uptick on your career high. That definitely has to be a surprise for most fantasy owners. Who is relevant fantasy-wise on a weekly basis? Obviously, Demko in the back net. When you're playing 64 of the 82, you're definitely relevant fantasy-wise because you're definitely going to get the owner some points there. On the back end, Quinn Hughes, no surprise there. He had a very good season. Young too, so definitely hold on to him. As I mentioned, keeper dynasty league. And up front, JT Miller and Elias Pettersson were fantasy relevant on a weekly basis, especially that second half when Pettersson started to turn it up there. Streamers, there was a few there. As I mentioned, Ekman Larson was a streamer, definitely for sure. I wouldn't play him every week, but he did have some good stretches there. As I mentioned, Brad Hunt at times in the second half just because he got second unit power play time. Up front, obviously, Connor Garland had a decent fantasy season. Bo Horvat. Tanner Pearson was good when he was moved up to the top line. He definitely helped out some owners when he got some time up there. And Brock Besser, as he was disappointing where he got drafted, if you had a chance to stream him, he was worth streaming there. Do hope you did enjoy today's episode. If you did, please remember to hit like, hit subscribe, and remember that notification bell. And we'll be out in a few days with another one. Enjoy the rest of the offseason there, fantasy owners.